hear all of the experience that everybody has across the panel. And also the last point that Alex made about the variety that one often has in your career, and you're never quite sure which pathway it's going to take. So if I explain that I began my career doing a traditional unfunded pupillage in those days, I'm that old. They weren't funded in those days. In 1998, there were some funding available, but it wasn't compulsory. So I did an unfunded pupillage at Francis Taylor Building next to Middle Temple Library. Those that know London very well will know where it is. And I had a very mixed pupillage: civil, crime, family, and also employment, and specialised very early on. And the reason for saying this is that once I'd completed my pupillage, I had no idea that I was going to go straight to the employed bar, but that's actually what happened. I got tenancy, and then shortly after getting tenancy at the self-employed bar, I was headhunted for a firm in Bedford called Borneo Linnells to head up their employment department. That was quite shocking, although I was somewhat older. And I should say, I think Sonia mentioned having a second career. I forgot to mention that before I became a barrister, at the age of around 32, I served for 15 years as a police officer in the police service. So sort of went from, sort of poacher to gamekeeper, arrested them, prosecuted them, then moved into doing lovely employment law through my pupillage. So it was quite a sort of an unusual journey. Once I got to the employed bar, I really enjoyed it. I then moved from that place in down in Bedford up to Stockport to work for Gorvin Solicitors, a regional firm who opened an office in Milton Keynes and ran and headed up, like an employment partner, their employment team. And this is all within the first 2 years of my practice. So I was quite surprised at how quickly I made progress, having done my pupillage in the way that I did. And I think a lot of barristers that have done employed and self-employed have probably made progress very quickly in their career. So there's a lot to be said for having an employer and having all the benefits of being an employee that you don't have, as I currently don't have, as a self-employed barrister. However, I set my chambers up this year, and it's a virtual set of chambers called Harwood Law. And I have 3 mini pupils working with me. I had 4 last month. I have 2 people working on 3-month scholarships, and I awarded 10 social mobility scholarships to try and help students through this difficult time, right from the start of the pandemic, where training opportunities for pupillage, mini pupillages in particular, have been very difficult to obtain. The employed bar, and I'm sure Ian will correct me or Alex will correct me, roughly 1 in 5 practicing barristers in England and Wales are employed barristers, which is significant of around about the 19,000 or so practicing barristers. And it is a fantastic career, and I've enjoyed every minute of the time that I've spent there. I've now been involved recently in selecting pupils, looking at numerous CVs. So we ran a very successful pupillage fair that many of you may have attended, run by the Bar Council all day on Saturday. I think members on this committee were present at that fair and helping as well. I'm sure Ian was there and helping, and I'm sure that others were helping too. And in that process, we ran 4 hours of CV clinics to help students with their applications or any aspect of their career progression. And they were ranging from first-year law students, as some of you may be, right the way through to people that are starting the bar course or have even completed the bar course. Because I think most of my colleagues will probably agree with me when I say this, that if you're coming to the bar, you sometimes have to play the long game. You sometimes have to wait until the right opportunity comes along, or you get the opportunity to get the right job. And that could be an employed pupillage, or it could be a self-employed pupillage. But focusing on that specifically tonight, the employed pupillages, they are very, very good if you can obtain them. I think the government legal service and other organisations and law firms are really after their own in-house counsel. There's a huge cost saving to a law firm if it grows its own counsel. This was one of the reasons that DWF, where I was a Deputy Director of Advocacy, was keen to set up their own in-house team. I wasn't the person that set up that advocacy unit, but was instrumental in helping them achieve the pupillage training organisations status. It's now called an AETO. And part of that process is providing students that have completed the bar course in the main with an advocacy opportunity as a paralegal. And that paralegal position then hopefully would lead them into becoming recruited as pupils within the firm. That meant that the organisation was able to keep all of its fees that it got from its clients in-house. So effectively, all of its civil litigation work could be done by its own pupil barristers and its own counsel. And in a sense, that was quite significant, and that's growing rapidly, as I understand it, as it probably is in other law firms where everybody is looking for a cost-effective solution. So I give you that as a context to what I'm then going to say about how we're all working differently during these difficult times. I think the employed bar have got a big role to play in offering people with pupilages, and many of you that come to the bar will come with, as Sonia did and I did and others did, with other experiences that you can bring to the party. And by that, I mean you will have jobs. Some of you will have part-time jobs while you're studying. It's not unusual when I was teaching the bar course to find that my full-time students and my part-time law students on the bar course were working like mad around their studies to try and make ends meet, because it's very expensive these days. The courses are expensive and they've got to live, and also they gain valuable experience that they can use in their toolkit for their applications to become a barrister. So let me just talk a little bit about CVs. You've all got a CV, I hope. That's the starting point. But one size doesn't fit all. And I think what you need to think about is a bit of self-reflection when you're looking at your CV. For me, it's about what is your USP, or what are your USPs, your unique selling points. Like me, I was able to use some of my police experience with being able to show that I dealt with certain things and relate those things and make sure they are relatable to the particular pupillage that you're applying for. So if you were applying, I don't know, in Ian's organisation, or Alex, or Sonia, or Patra, or anybody really that's working at the employed bar, you'd be thinking, what sort of skill set will I need to impress that employer? How will I show that what I've done in my other jobs, in my other life, because we've all often had other lives, certainly my Open University students did a whole range of different things, and we're all ages. Some single parents, some working full-time as well as studying, etc. So they have a massive amount to offer. And I think one of the things I've noticed, and I've been doing a lot of CV work, not just on Saturday, but throughout the year and helping students, is that people undersell themselves. They really don't think about what skills they have and how they might relate to the particular role that they're applying for. And let me give you an example. I often say to students, get your legal experience first at the top of your CV. That's what the employer or prospective employer or person in chambers would want to see. What have you done that's legally relevant? But don't just trot it out like a narrative. It's got to make sense. It's got to relate to the skills that a pupil barrister is going to need. Now, he or she is going to need to do what I call it the what, the so what, the now what. The what is, well, what have I done? And then you've got the so what. Well, so how is that important to the role that I'm applying for? And the now what, this experiential learning cycle, the now what is, how am I going to relate what I've done elsewhere in my legal experience or non-legal experience as well? How am I going to relate that to what a pupil barrister is required to do when they go into pupillage for their normal 12-month pupillage? Now, this is important. All of the course providers that provide the bar course provide a whole host of information about their courses and the course content and the course outline and the objectives of each unit. So Patrick teaches advocacy, so the skills of advocacy would be set out in a course specification document, which is available to all of you online. So what you need to be thinking about is, if you've done mooting and you've done debating and you've done, if you like, you've had successful advocacy competitions, you'd be wanting to generate information that shows that the competition you did was directly relevant to the advocacy skills that you've gained through that competition, and that it's relevant to maybe cross-examination or examination in chief or something like that, that you can impress an employer with, to say, look, I won that competition over there. There were 150 people in that competition. I came top, or we came top, the two of us, and those skills that we gained in that were about cross-examination, was about an opening the case or closing the case or whatever it might be. But nevertheless, you need to be able to therefore do the now what bit, which is say, what skill did I get over there that I can use and demonstrate that that's what they're looking for in pupillage. Many employers are hoping that you will offer them something different and something special. And I know those of you that have done the bar course or will be doing it or are going to be doing it in due course will get all of those skills when you do it. But those skills are usable right now. There's a whole range of things that you can do to build up your skill set, not least of which I think Ian was saying becoming a member of BACFI, because clearly there are webinars available that BACFI have that are going to be particularly focused on you coming to the employed bar. The employed bar for many is a very good route in terms of being able to secure, a good salary, a good career with prospects. Now, it doesn't matter whether you do the employed bar and then go back to the self-employed bar and then come back again. That's entirely up to you. I think, Alex, you were talking about how your route was somewhat different as you were moving through your career. And I think we never quite know what's around the corner. So it's always useful to know that you've got choices. So just in terms of the CV again, legal experience at the top, educational experience, I think you need to focus on your best points and not all of your points. I don't want to know what you got in year one in land law or something or contract. I do want to know what your final grades were in year three. I do want to know that you got a first class degree, and I do want to know that you got a 2-1. If you'd got a 2-2, then there might have been really good mitigation as to why you got a 2-2 that you need to fully explain as a footnote, perhaps, to you getting a 2-2. Because things happen in people's lives when they're studying that mean that they don't always do their best. That can often be compensated later when you go to do the bar course, because you may achieve an outstanding or a very competent, and therefore, if you like, in a sense, it can be explained. But I think that most of my colleagues will probably agree with me that you do need good academics these days to be successful at the bar, but you need a lot of other skills as well. People skills, client management skills, client care skills, all of these things that many of the inns provide lots of support. Some of the members here talking tonight are benchers and members of their own inn. I am at Lincoln's, and I'm an advocacy tutor as well for Lincoln's Inn for the pupils going into their second six. So we all try and give something back to help you at different stages of your journey. And what I would say to you is that use the people that you've got here at BACFI as a resource. They are invaluable in terms of their experience. Just listening to the things that Sonia, Patrick, Gaynor, Ian, Alexandra, and so on have all done, just think about that experience that you can tap into post this session. I'm sure they're not going to thank me now if I say you can direct message them through their LinkedIn or their organisations. But nevertheless, following the successful pupillage fair on Saturday, where we had a large number of people attend when we were running the clinics, there was a huge number that we got through. I've had an awful lot of messages post-session via LinkedIn, and this is no exception this evening. If anybody wants to talk to me about anything, they can direct message me on LinkedIn. So there's that opportunity, because I appreciate there's a limited amount of time to talk to you this evening. It's also very useful, and what we did in the bar conference, and it might be something that BACFI may think about as well, is that the student in the CV clinic was able to share online their CV with us. Now, that can't be done given that there's a large number of you, and this is more of a didactic sort of teach to a large number of people. But nevertheless, it might be that BACFI consider maybe in the future, it's not for me to say, but maybe they'll consider branching off and doing some one-to-one mentoring sessions for students that are coming through and are keen to come to the employed bar. That's just something to think about, because we found from a social mobility point of view on the Bar Council that we were able to reach almost treble the number of students that we were able to reach last year when it was an in-person attendance at UCL in London. And that therefore means people from overseas, people that were, some of my students were working on Saturday and they dipped in their lunchtime just to do the CV session and get one of us for a session. But equally, and this is very important, we provided all the stuff that was happening on Saturday in recorded lectures, if you like, to be taken away post-session. And one very smart student came into my CV clinic and said, I've seen all the scholarship stuff, Barry, about, middle, Grays, inner, and Lincoln's. I've seen all of that because it's been pre-recorded, but I'm going to watch that later when I finish my Saturday job. But I wanted to get this clinic with you, and so she got a clinic with me in terms of her CV. Then I looked at it afterwards, and obviously it's improved dramatically. So just finishing off really with the CV, it's a living document. It's a document that needs to be, it needs to change. You may have more than one CV. That's absolutely fine, but you should have some generic material, legal experience, education, moving down to other relevant experience, non-legal experiences, and references on request. That's the general format. I have to tell you that those that are applying through the gateway application process for pupillage, they are vetted, and I know my inn in particular offer a course on how to prepare for gateway applications and CVs. They are vetted so carefully that if you don't dot the I's and cross the T's, they are rejected in a paper sift. So if you spell individual chambers' names wrong, if you get something grammatically very poorly expressed, that's immediately going to go in the do not interview box, in my opinion, because there are so many excellent students that will have, if you like, looked and looked again at the quality of their document. I've been looking through some CVs on Saturday, and some of them were really excellent and some of them were not so good. And those that were not so good hadn't really thought about really where they were. It's a living document that changes every moment in time. So the point I'm making is that you've got to make sure that you keep it up to date, you keep refreshing it, and you keep making, if you like, it fit the role that you're applying for. So Ian, those are the general, and Alex, those are the general points I wanted to make. I'm hopefully haven't spoken for too long, and if anybody has any questions, I'll hand back.
Barry, thank you. That was really interesting and informative. I would like to give the students on the call an opportunity to ask questions, if that's all right with you. But before I do so, I did just want to let everybody know that we are recording this session. Having done that bit of housekeeping, does anybody have a question they'd like to ask Barry? Then Barry, if you don't mind, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
What do you think the most important skill for an employed barrister is, particularly at the beginning of their career?
Oh, that's an amazingly good question. I wish I could pick the most important skill. I think the most important skill is to recognize that you are an employee, and that going with that comes the whole thing about being an employee, which is the master servant. And I'm an employment lawyer, so I'm speaking from an employment law point of view. If you've worked for an employer, quite a lot of people choose not to do so when they come to the bar, but a lot of people choose to do it because they liked working for an employer. So for me, the most important skill, I think, is to be flexible. I think to be flexible in your approach, because I think a pupillage is often a means to an end. I don't think it matters where you start. It's often where you finish that's important. I think many of you have done, if you like, varying things throughout your careers. I don't know if any of you have just simply been at the employed bar from the beginning, but I found in my time that jumping from one side of it to the other gave me tremendous experience. I'll give you an example, if I may. I do public access work, and I've been doing that since the scheme was introduced by the bar in 2006, Alex, which is where, as you know, members of the public can instruct me directly like they can a solicitor, and they therefore don't need a solicitor. Many barristers do that now, and therefore the skills I gained by being like at partner level in organizations in terms of client care and client satisfaction were invaluable to me taking on that public access work. So that's perhaps an example I might give. I hope that answers the question.
It does really nicely, thank you. And I think you made two key points. One of the differences between we and the employed bar and those of our colleagues at the self-employed bar is that we are employees, and that does cast a different light. And whilst we have our duty to the Bar Council, duty to the courts, we do have our duty as employees too. So we've got different priorities to balance. And I think your point about flexibility is an important one. And I think as we'll talk to the rest of the panel today, thank you. I think what happens sometimes, if one of us is speaking and we're not all on mute, you get the feedback. So thanks for that. So yes, I think flexibility, adaptability is key. And what I'm hoping is that we talk to the rest of the panel, those points will come across. I think, Barry, you gave some great examples, and just hearing from everybody and the range of work they've done shows exactly why flexibility and adaptability is important. Now, Barry, I know we promised that we wouldn't take up too much of your time. You're very welcome to join us, but I know you're a busy man with other commitments. So if you do have to drop off, please feel free. But thank you very much on behalf of BACFI and everybody at tonight's session. We've really appreciated listening to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I hope if anybody wants to get in touch, they can. I'm being a victim of my own discussion now and saying that they can direct message me on LinkedIn, but I do mean that. And Ian will tell you that we're doing all we can on the Bar Council to promote social mobility at the moment with a number of, if you like, individual barristers, self-employed and employed, who we're trying to feature, who've overcome, Alexandra, so many hurdles to succeed at the bar. And you've got to be resilient and keep going. That's what I would say.
Barry, there's just one thing in the chat which is asking about your video clinic. So I'm sure the person, Sue Kim, will contact you directly afterwards. There's no need to sort of deal with it now. I think she missed you on Saturday and is keen.
Patrick, you just went on to mute, but I think you were saying there's a question about Barry's video clinics and whether they're still available.
Yeah, I've been following up with people that I saw within the context of the Bar Council meeting, and I've asked them to direct message me if I saw them. But apart from that, happy to direct message me and see if I can help them or signpost them to somebody that can. Yes, happy to do that. But if they're asking about my virtual mini pupilages, they are all being run through now, Bridging the Bar, which is an organisation that's been set up. It's a charitable organisation with over 40 sets of chambers that are offering, if you like, different experiences from mentoring to. So if you want to register, they're online. They're called Bridging the Bar. All my pupilages, Alex, from January will be recruiting via Bridging the Bar because they've got a social mobility agenda. Okay.
Barry, that's incredibly helpful. And to everybody on the call, what we are doing is collating a list of the employed pupilages we know are available and the people who provide those pupilages. We'll be able to share that after the event, but we'll also add Bridging the Bar to it, Barry, because that sounds like a fantastic initiative. And once again, Barry, we've got a number of people in the chat saying thank you and how much they've enjoyed listening to you and how much they've learned from you. So thanks again from us all.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alex. I hope you all have a lovely evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you and good night.
Bye-bye.
We're going to move over to the next part of this evening. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to ask the panel some questions, but you've got an opportunity to ask questions as well. So I'll ask a question and we'll see what our panelists have to say. But please keep using the chat function. We'll do our best to monitor it, but I'll try and pause after each question as well and see if I can give you an opportunity to even come off mute and ask some questions. What we want to do is to make this as interactive as possible, and we appreciate it's difficult when we're on a virtual platform like this. But actually, it's a good skill to learn, because I'm sure our panelists will tell you one of the difficulties at the moment is we're not meeting our clients, our colleagues face to face. What we're having to do is talk to our colleagues like this every single day. We're far more familiar with Teams and Zoom than we ever thought we would be. And we're having to come up with new ways, new styles of advocacy, new ways to communicate. So this is a nice example of what we're doing every day. Right. I'm going to move on to the very first question now. And the first question I've got, what advice would you give to people about obtaining a pupillage? And I'm going to ask Ryan that question first of all.
Hello, everybody. I think a lot of you will be very focused at this time on obtaining a pupillage, and good reason. It's never been easy, and it's probably harder now than it's ever been. The few tips I can offer from my own experience and from seeing various generations of potential pupils go through the system are as follows. First, most importantly, choose your chambers well. There's a lot of information about the minimum level of academic achievement you would need to be a junior tenant at a particular set. It will all be on their website, and the time you spend looking at background of their junior barristers will give you an indication as to whether you could imagine yourself joining that group of people. You'll also discover from their website something about the culture of the chambers if you've not already done a mini pupillage there. In my own experience, I did maybe 2 mini pupillages, and that was enough. You don't need to have done dozens. What you do need is to have something to talk about and to show that you learned on those mini pupillages. Second point, I'll try to be quick, is really to underline something that Barry said, and that is to know your strengths and weaknesses. Your CV is really a marketing document, and you've got 2 aims. 1, to get an interview, and 2, to have something to talk about if you are interviewed. The good news, I think, is that if you are interviewed, you have a chance. Very few chambers have time to interview candidates who they've already almost dismissed. So you don't need to be too defensive about any missteps or failures on your CV. Everybody's allowed to have made a mistake. They'll be looking for how you've responded to it. And again, frankly, my own view, honesty will go a long way, and excuses are not often well received. Short of the bereavement in the family, you're better to point out how you've learned from any mistakes you've made. Thirdly, have something to talk about. When you get to the interview, the people interviewing you are going to want to find out something about you, and they're going to want the experience to go well. They're seeing a lot of people, and anything you can do to make it easier for them to assess you will be to your advantage. My own, if you're passionate about the law, it will show by what you choose to talk about. In my own experience, I could suggest that you learn a lot about the details of a recent Court of Appeal or Supreme Court case. At my time, it was a House of Lords decision in Ruxley Electronics. I chose to study in some detail. It was a recent decision with clear legal principles which you could explain to the people interviewing you. You could also talk about a court visit or your experience on mini pupillages. But have something to talk about and try to do something law-focused. Finally, be natural. Be yourself. It's very hard to put on a front. It's a stressful time. They're not going to expect you to be particularly grand or to be over-experienced or to have a huge amount of knowledge about what happens at the bar at this stage. They'll be looking for your commitment to the profession, your commitment to your past studies, and the idea that you would be a good person to have around chambers as a pupil. And I think Barry emphasised those points pretty well. That's all I'd like to say, really.
Thanks very much, Ryan. That was great. You know, and something you said there really struck home about researching something so you've got something to talk about. That's a great tip. Think about what's happening today as well. We're actually living through a time that I think law students are going to be writing their dissertations about. What's happening with Brexit is unprecedented. There's been legal challenges. There's things going through the House of Lords at the moment that lawyers are very excited about. Read the newspaper. I wouldn't be surprised if you've got an interview if somebody asks you something very topical. Be prepared to answer topical questions, particularly if they've got a legal angle. And what's happening today certainly does. Sonia, I was going to ask you actually, we've talked before about your thoughts on the type of experience you can get that can stand you in good stead when you're applying for a pupillage, and how you don't always have to go direct to a pupillage.
Yes. So I started working as a paralegal, and most of us will understand, if we've ever done any paralegal work, often you sit at the photocopier, and I was doing vast amounts of photocopying, and I started to read what I was photocopying, and it was so interesting. I started asking questions about it. I got to the table with the case with some very senior barristers, so you can pick up very good experience to put on your CV in ways that you don't always think that that's going to happen. I signed up for things when I was doing my BBC. So a lot of us have said we train in advocacy, but we all have to be trained before we can be let loose on students. And I went off to my inn where the trainers were training as they used to call them guinea pigs then. And I got to meet people and got to see things and got to work on things. So I think it is sign up for things, even if you don't think they're going to be that valuable. They can turn out to be enormously valuable. Through my links at the inn, I got my first job at the employed bar because somebody said, I know someone that's looking for something, because I was there and I was talking and meeting with people. So I think it's really, really important to understand there's more than one way to do things. I also think, and I want to dispel the myth that going to the employed bar, that you won't get a court practice. I did get a court practice. I spent a lot of my time in the High Court and the Court of Appeal as an employed barrister. So I really think that's hugely important. And I've just seen a question on the chat, someone asking about language skills. So in a lot of our work, we are working in international organisations and drafting contracts in other languages and things like that, and being able to speak to clients. I think if you have got language skills, they can be very useful at the employed bar. But I think it is understanding the employed bar isn't something you do because you can't do anything else. I went with my plan to get employment to actually just get and go into chambers. And I actually found that I didn't need to do that. I was so happy doing what I was doing and meeting the challenges. And I think in some ways at the employed bar, as Barry said, you hit challenges, bigger challenges, much earlier in your career than perhaps you would at the self-employed bar. So I think that's worth thinking about, but definitely signing up for things and depth, updating, finding things every day. If you say, we hear lots of waffle a lot of time from people that are trying to join the bar. I don't think anyone comes to the bar and says they're not passionate, but talk to me about why. Show me, demonstrate, just don't tell me that you are. And understanding about what's relevant, what's topical. Show me your passion, talk to me about it.
Thank you, Sonia. And you know, Sonia, your passion comes across as well. I wanted to also make a point on the question on language skills. As Sonia said, I work for an international organisation, and my job is to be head of EU regulatory change. Every day I speak to my colleagues in France, Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg, Spain, Italy, Poland. They're the ones I talk to most, but I also have weekly catch-ups with my colleagues in Asia. And I am embarrassed at how good their English is. They never ask me to speak their language, which is a good thing because I can't. But their English and their business and legal English is incredibly strong, and they would not get a job in international finance and international commerce without being at least bilingual. If you want to join the Commission Legal Service, you're supposed to have 3 languages. English and one other very good language. They'll allow you to learn a 3rd language when you're there. Language skills are a huge asset. Now, I do have another question, but before I move on to that, I want to ask you attending this session, do you have any more questions on advice for getting a pupillage? You can always ask them later. I'm going to go to my next question now, and I'm going to ask Gaynor this question. What I'm interested in is whether or not you had a career plan. Did you know, aged 11, that you were going to be General Counsel of CLS?
So the short answer to that is not at all, no. I mean, I didn't really, I mean, I guess from my perspective, I was kind of from a very working class family. No one had gone to university in my family before, and to be quite frank, my 6th form college at the time wasn't great in terms of career advice. So it was a little bit kind of, you know, what looks interesting, what might I enjoy going forward? And of course, what you see in the brochures tend to be the wig and gown, the High Court, you know, the court practice. I guess from that point, I thought that looks fun. You know, I think I'd enjoy that. I'm kind of interested in the law. That's how I came to do a legal degree. But beyond that, I had no plan, really. I think I deep down thought, yeah, I'd, you know, probably rather be a barrister than a solicitor. But really, the honest truth is I didn't know why that might be. I think I fell in love a little bit with the sexy kind of, you know, court persona. So really went with that. I really struggled to get pupillage. I, like I say, was from a working class background. You know, I did a lot of mini pupillages, but I would agree with Ryan. For me, it was more about quality than quantity. And I was actually very lucky because one particular mini pupillage that I did, I kind of tried to make myself a little bit indispensable by doing lots of other things. So really helping the barristers kind of sort through their briefs and things. So not really kind of just honing in on the court side. And I ended up staying there for the whole summer, 1 year, which was just brilliant, and really gave me an insight into what that, you know, that kind of life was like. So for me, I think I've probably always gone with the mantra of just give it a go. Don't be afraid of things. And lots of different opportunities will come. And I think if you try to make too much of a plan, then you won't take those opportunities because you'll think, oh, it doesn't fit with my particular career path or what I see for myself. And I think definitely, given the panel in particular, I would say don't ever be closed off to what employed barristers do. There is a huge amount of opportunity there and a huge amount of variety. And that's really, really important. And I don't think you need a plan. It's healthy to have a static plan because there is so much out there that you can get involved with, you know, look at. You may even completely, you know, go outside the law. There are lots and lots of opportunities out there. With a legal degree, you can do lots of different things. So I would say don't make too much of a plan, or don't let your plan be inflexible, I would say, if you have one. But I didn't have a plan beyond university, really.
On that point, people will probably know that Tim Martin, the head of Wetherspoons, probably a billionaire, trained at the bar and was intending to be a self-employed barrister, and just took a summer job in a pub to help a friend. So life is full of opportunities, and it's really when you're young, get lots of experience. That would be my advice.
And that ties very nicely back to one of the points Barry made, the importance of being flexible, being adaptable. Patrick, I want to ask you this question, because I've always thought as an outsider looking in, there was a theme throughout your career. And so I always assumed that you had a plan. Did you?
Well, tell me what you thought the theme was. My theme has always just been random potluck, but I'd be interested to hear what you thought it was.
So I would have always thought there was a little bit of crime, and then make it a commercial, criminal commercial, SFO, fraud.
Yeah, no, it started off as just doing crime because frankly, I did a lot of applications. It was in the day pre the pupillage portal or whatever it's now called, and I did sort of typewritten applications at home, frankly, in the days before computer, I have to confess. So it was all really pretty difficult to try and type all of these out and send them out. And crime was the only thing actually I was really very interested in. I did a bit of family work, but being stuck in the Watford family court at 8 o'clock on a Friday night, hearing a husband and wife arguing about who owned what CDs, drove me to the conclusion that I could never, ever do family for the rest of my life, as most people end up thinking it's a dreadful result at the end of the day. So crime, yeah, was the only thing that I wanted to do. And actually, I thought I'd always be in Chambers. When I got at Chambers, I was quite lucky. I had an interview. I did a stack of interviews for lots of places, and when they heard my Irish accent, and it was the time of the Troubles with Northern Ireland, I was, they just started speaking about the Troubles or something non-legal related, and I knew I would have not a hope in hell of getting through. And actually, I ended up liking the people that eventually did give me a pupillage. And the thing is, you have to have something to talk about. And if you get on with the people that you are being interviewed with, it's normally a good indication that you'll get on with them if you work there. And that's what happened. I always thought I would be at the criminal bar throughout, but actually with criminal legal aid and the dips in prices being paid out for criminal legal aid, I thought actually I'd look elsewhere. And so it was only at that stage I started thinking I need a plan, because I don't see the criminal self-employed bar lasting forever. So that's where I started trying to make a plan, and then went to the SFO to work within government, the Serious Fraud Office, sort of prosecuting there. So yes, the crime has been throughout. And then whilst I was at the Serious Fraud Office, I thought either I could stay in government and just get higher and higher and higher, or I could jump back out and go to the bar, or I could go to a law firm. So I had three sort of options, and then ultimately decided that what I thought was the most interesting was, becoming a partner in a law firm when I was sort of hired to come across here. So that's as far as my plan sort of got to, was planning at different stages. But one thing which somebody always told me is your next job should never be the one that you finally settle on. It should be the one that prepares you for the job that you want to go to after that, which I always thought was an interesting way of looking at things. And frankly, each job is going back to one of the earlier questions, how do you get a pupillage? My view is you need to have an interesting CV. And you need to stand out. Everybody's got brilliant grades. Everybody's got brilliant grades from brilliant universities. Everybody's done mini pupillages here and there. You need something that makes you stand out in the application stage, at the interview stage, and then when you're doing a pupillage, you need to stand out. And people see that you're hardworking, see that you're dedicated, see that you're honest, reliable. You're then a shoe-in to get work, anywhere basically. So anyway, apologies for my rant.
That wasn't a rant at all. It was really interesting. Thank you, Patrick. I'm just having a quick look at the chat.
Just while you're reading that, I see there's one on diversity, and I'd probably just put my tuppence worth in. I was an older woman coming to the bar. When I decided I wanted to do this, my mother said, "Do you want to have children?" and so I got on with that while I was doing my law degree. So I arrived becoming qualified with 2 tiny children and being an older woman. I would say at the employed bar, diversity is something that has to be demonstrated and practiced. We all have it within our organisations, HR, we have to demonstrate diversity. We have to demonstrate equality. We can't just pay lip service to it. Not that I would hope anybody would, but we are actively monitored. And, you know, our pay has to, there are in certain fields now, you have to demonstrate all of that. So I would say the employed bar demonstrates great diversity.
Yeah, Sonia, I'd like to add to that. I did a I did a first 6 months in a traditional barristers' chambers, and all I came across, it wasn't a good experience because I had a huge lot of prejudice against my class. It was very class-based. Everyone seemed to be upper class. It was about what school, what university. And then I was lucky enough to get a commercial pupillage working for a subsidiary of GEC. And as soon as I walked in, no one asked me what school I went to. No one asked me what university. They were just interested in my skills and talents. And it was such a refreshing change. And I learned far more in one first week in industry than I ever did in my 6 months in a barrister's chambers. So I would agree with you there, Sonia, that the employed bar and employers are passionate about diversity. Most big multinationals have, you know, whole functions looking at diversity and inclusion. And being employed means that you can have more opportunities. You can have a family. You can pursue other interests. You might have caring responsibilities for elderly people, and companies are much more conducive to giving you flexible work arrangements. So I think that's one of the benefits of being at the employed bar.
I think you're both spot on, and certainly at HSBC at the moment, the Black Lives Matter movement has caused us to focus on all types of diversity and inclusion, but particularly racial and ethnic diversity. And we are doing a lot to educate ourselves, but to learn how we can empower others around us. And for me, it has been really encouraging to see how quickly industry has responded to the Black Lives Matter movement, and how many people have started doing something and standing up and speaking out and saying that they want to see change. And you've just got to Google and you'll see how much the big companies are doing on this at the moment. So I think that's something we can be very agile about, and we are being agile about. And for all of us that work in that environment, it's been a positive step. Now, my next question is, I'd like us all to cast our minds back, perhaps not very far, but is there any advice you would give your younger self? Looking back, what would you have said? What would you like to say to your younger self to help them when they start off their career at the employed bar? I'm going to ask you first, Ian.
Right. Well, one thing that I was like Gaynor. I went to a comprehensive school. No one in my family had been to university. No one had ever been a solicitor or barrister. So I'd got absolutely no connections. My father worked in industry, so he actually arranged for me to talk to the in-house lawyers of the CEGB, the old forerunner to PowerGen and National Power, and because he was a buyer and he was aware that companies have in-house lawyers, so that was good. But I think to my younger self, I would say is try and tap into those connections and those resources that you get access to. Do your research, because joining an organisation like BACFI, is a great way to kind of network, get to know people in industry, for example, to get advice, because if you haven't got a background and you don't know people, then that's the best way to get to talk to people that have got that experience and that knowledge. So I think that would be my tip, is do your research, do networking, be confident, put yourself forward. And I think the other thing is, and I think I did have this, I was passionate. I wanted to be a barrister from the age of 11, and I did everything I possibly could do, despite my school saying people from your background can't be barristers. I was actually told that by the careers advisor, which kind of made me more determined to do it. But yeah, be passionate, use your energy, but do your research and do your networking. And I think that would be a good tip from me.
Thank you, Ian. What about you, Sonia? What would you have said to the younger Sonia?
I think for me, one of the things, although I had a lot of confidence in many ways to go and do a lot of things, I think my confidence in myself, my sort of deep-seated belief about whether I was going to make it, I think I maybe didn't believe it enough. And I did get some very good advice from a very senior barrister I was talking to. And he said to me, you really need to have more self-belief. You're very good at what you're doing. And I think I didn't realise that it wasn't coming across. And I think it followed me for quite a long time, actually. It almost, I had a convent education. So this idea that you would ring your own bell, essentially, it was considered showing off, and it wasn't encouraged. So it took me a while. But I think there's a counteract to that. What I've seen with some young people coming through, they've almost got deluded self-belief and arrogance. So I think there's a difference between the confidence that Ian and I are talking about, this self-confidence to demonstrate that you're going to be good at something, is very important. To try to believe it, because I think you have to understand you're going to get rejection. You know, one year I was speaking at this where we were all in the same room, and Brenda Hale was there, and I was talking about failure. All of us, however successful we are, have failed. But I think the rejection, when you are a young person trying to get to the bar, you have to understand, for the majority of us, rejection is going to come. And I can remember, you know, having one pupillage interview. It was the only one I had at that round, and I was rejected. And I got down to the last two, and it was painful. It felt physically painful. And so you've got to build up this confidence, this robustness, and resilience, like Ian said, if you really want to make it. And to try to build up your knowledge base, I think really helps with that. When I think about where I've been most successful, either at interview or in a case, it's where I've been really knowledgeable, and it gives you confidence.
Do you know, Ian, do you know, Sonia, it makes me realise how much we're all alike, because I would agree with everything you said, and that's exactly what I would say to a younger me as well. We talked about Black Lives Matter a moment ago, and as I said, we had some education to try and understand what it feels like to be black working in a bank. And something one of my female colleagues, also a lawyer, said to me really struck home. She said, every time I walk into a room, I feel different. And I think people will assume I don't fit in just because of how I look. And what that made me think was, gosh, but I feel like that too. But perhaps for me, it's easier to cover it up because I look like more people. But it made me think we do all feel the same. And part of growing up is recognizing that everybody feels like that. Part of growing up is trying to do things to make other people feel included so that people don't feel excluded. but also developing the resilience to cope with the rejections that Sonia mentioned. Somebody on the chat actually said, can we rewind a little bit? What is an employed barrister? What is the employed bar? What's the difference between being an employed bar and being at the self-employed bar? Are we both barristers? Would anyone of the panel like to tackle that one?
Well, I'll tackle it. Well, an employed barrister, an employed barrister is someone who obviously is employed by a company, but there are, in the employed bar, there are sort of two main areas that barristers are employed. One is by companies like British Gas, BT, Lloyds Bank, HSBC Bank. They actually have their own in-house legal departments. They're like a law firm within the company, and they provide legal advice and legal services to the company that employs them. And there's a whole range of different roles. If you just take a typical legal department of a large company, there will be a commercial department doing commercial contracts for procurement and sales. There may be an intellectual property and patent office looking after the assets of the company. There might be a regulatory department, as Alex does, looking at regulatory matters concerning the company. There will probably be a litigation and disputes team. So you have all these different departments all providing. But conversely, you could work for a smaller company and you are the sole lawyer for that company. And all those different range of legal topics, you will be expected not necessarily to know everything, but to know where to get that legal advice. So there's a whole range of different areas. And the other side is that a lot of barristers are employed by solicitors firms now. When I first qualified as a barrister, you couldn't be. But now people like Patrick are now barristers, but partners in a solicitor's firm. And they are acting as in-house counsel to the clients of the law firm. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a snapshot of the sort of areas of legal work that employed barristers do.
And of course,
I think the other area is the within government, because
yes,
barristers will get employed within government. The CPS. There's many questions in the chat about, you know, where are all of these jobs and pupilages, etc. Sandra, the BACFI secretary, has got a list of where all of the pupilages are that are offered. But as Ian's mentioned, they're often within companies, and we've got a list of those. They're often within law firms, but there actually aren't that many law firms that offer pupilages. And the big area which does offer pupilages will be the Crown Prosecution Service, where you do your advocacy in court generally. The Royal Navy offers pupilages. I think there's some at the Army as well. And then you get Nursing and Midwifery Council. If there's disciplinary proceedings, they offer pupilages. And then I think the Government Legal Service itself offers some pupilages there. So those are the sorts of places within the public and private sector that do them. And then we've got the list that we can circulate at the end of the session as to where you can look for these. There's not a huge amount of them. That is the downside. I think ultimately throughout the course of the any given year, there's about 150 sort of pupilages and/or tenancies that are given out within the self-employed bar, and then within the employed bar, it's actually probably a lot less than that. I can't imagine that it's much more than 50 or 60. So I think one of the challenges that you'll face is just sort of getting out there and finding all of these places and just applying for all of them, because all of them will give you, or any of them will give you, great experience.
And I think there are the two routes into the employed bar. There's getting an employed pupillage, but a lot of us have come via the self-employed bar. So we've had experience of both the self-employed bar and the employed bar, and we made a choice to go to the employed bar. And there could be a huge range of reasons why, but a key one that is important is the stability of being employed.
Yes, I'd echo that. Both employed and self-employed barristers are regulated by the Bar Council. They've all gone through a similar training process and undertaken pupillage. The main difference really is
practicing. Sorry, Ryan.
No, the main difference is that employed barristers tend not to sit in chambers waiting for instructions.
We have the same practicing certificate
from their employer, but the actual type of work amongst employed barristers varies enormously. And as you heard from Sonia, it's certainly possible to do a lot of advocacy within the employed bar. But equally, the type of work available in the self-employed bar varies enormously. The amount of court time a tax barrister will do compared to a criminal law barrister is at completely different ends of the spectrum.
I think the other thing to mention as well about the employed bar is that the kind of slightly broader range of opportunities that it brings in terms of things like managing teams. Because you're just advising in a different environment. Your client is always there. So, you know, from my perspective, for example, you know, my clients are really obviously the group of companies that CLS sits within, but also it's the CEO, it's the board members of those various companies. And from that point of view, being on the executive management committee as well, that means that I'm very much involved in what is the direction of the group, where are we going, what are the business decisions we're making, what's our strategy, what do our finances look like, you know. So it's an incredibly broad and quite daunting role, actually, because a lawyer has a tendency sometimes to be, you know, I can tick the box around the law. I understand the law. I'm a subject matter expert, but oh, don't give me anything else. You know, I'm not sure I know about the accounting side or the finance side, but actually, you know, it gives you that opportunity if you want it to move into those types of roles as well, and the management roles too. So, and like others have said, you know, there's all different aspects to it. Advocacy comes in lots of different guises, not just in court. So I think that's the important thing to bear in mind.
I think what I've realised is that I enjoy being part of a multidisciplinary team that has a problem and runs with it from beginning to end. And that's something you don't see very much in the self-employed bar, because there you can be more like a consultant and brought in to deal with discrete issues of a bigger project. I've worked on Brexit for HSBC since before the referendum, and one of the jobs of my team is to minimise the amount of external counsel we use. So we act as if we were our own set of chambers, our own law firm, and we give advice to other lawyers in the bank. And I'm sitting there with economists and with bankers and with people from regulatory compliance and with people whose job it is to lobby governments and the EU. And we have a multidisciplinary team that work together to come up with a solution. And the law is part of that solution, but we need the contributions of all members of that team. And I enjoy that. I enjoy being a part of a team, and I enjoy learning about the bigger picture that Gaynor spoke about, because that means our legal advice is practical, it's commercial, it's sensible, it's not just theoretical and academic, though you need that to start with.
Yeah, I mean, I do commercial transactions with big suppliers to the bank. So I'm part of a virtual deal team. I have a procurement manager, there'll be a supplier relations manager, there'll be the business lead from the business that wants the particular product or service. We could be buying in software, we could be outsourcing an IT function, and we all form together into a virtual team, each doing a role within it. But you do get involved in business decisions, commercial decisions, as well as legal, because you're trying to help your organization achieve its business objectives in the best way, and you'll draw upon expertise from regulatory risk or privacy manager, on data protection. So you get drawn into all sorts of different issues. And that's one of the really fun things about working in-house, is that you get this multidisciplined approach, as you say, Alex. And I really enjoy working with people who aren't lawyers, actually, and that's great fun.
I think as well I was going to say, I think there are good opportunities if you are a young person going into an organisation. I can remember I showed some interest in some patent law when I went to work for private healthcare, and I was able to register a patent, and I learnt a lot about patent law. And sort of 5 years later, you know, I kept that interest up. I was able to give a very high level legal advice in the end on something that I didn't really know very much about when I started, and it was invaluable when I started working with pharmaceuticals. So I think there are a breadth of opportunities to learn things in industry that you wouldn't necessarily get in chambers.
Thanks, everyone. I'm conscious we're running close to the end of this session, so I just want to finish with asking, what practical tips would you give someone at the start of their career? Would you give someone looking for a pupillage now, particularly in the current climate? Could I come to you first, Gaynor?
Sure. So I think for me, I would say use your resources as much as you can. I think Barry had already kind of mentioned that. Especially, I think we would probably all echo the fact that it's very, very easy in the employed bar to lose contact with your in, but that's a great source of support for you. And so you should really keep that. I would say, don't go for loads of mini pupillages, just try and find some good ones and ones that give you good breadth of opportunity. Try and get some employed bar as well as self-employed bar, so that you've got a good view of all different things and what lots of different people do. And then I think the other thing I would say is, as you get experience, just keep updating your CV. Believe me, you still need it, no matter how many years qualified you are. 25 years later, the number of times people say, oh, could you give me an extract from your CV or a potted history of your career, then it's always there for you. So it's just much better to just, you know, keep up to date, just pop it on when you do it, when you think of it, pull it all together at a future point in time if needs be, but just keep all that experience under your belt, and go with what you enjoy. I think, you know, don't feel forced into doing things because you think it's the right thing to do. Do what you enjoy, because that's the most important thing. That will keep you there.
And you spend a lot of your life working at the end of the day. What about you, Patrick? What would your top tips be?
I think probably the main one would probably be to, because if I had to do my life again, I'd have probably gone straight to working in government right from the off, because and I do advocacy training with a lot of students that are coming through and new practitioners, and inevitably those barristers or pupil barristers that have worked in government get tons of responsibility way earlier than they ever do when they're in a very hierarchical chambers that has a bunch of old white males at the very top who snaffle all the work and just give you the donkey work to do at the bottom, the fabled photocopying that Sonia was mentioning. If you're in government, you've got half a brain, you've got a bit of interest, you will have tons of work thrown at you. And the barristers that I see who come from the employed bar, working within government, within other places such as the Financial Conduct Authority and so on, are just so much better because there's so much more experience. So that's the kind of one key thing I'd say, is actually look at government, because it's a great place. But just in terms of a sort of magnificent 7 of things which I think, you know, anybody at a young age should be doing, is just, you know, make your CV different, number 1. 2, just get lots of experience anywhere, pro bono, human rights, diversity work, wherever. Kind of third one, work hard, just get crazily good results. Everybody notices great results. Fourth point is Ian's bit, network like mad. Join organizations, meet people. You just never know. In a couple of years' time, I'm in the crime community, for want of a better word, and we all circulate in different posts. We all work within government. We all go to law firms. We all then go into industry. And I know them all. I've worked with them for like 20 odd years. So network like crazy would be the fourth thing. Fifth one would be apply for anything. Paralegal work, work on sort of charities, work on pro bono things. It's all experience. It all looks great in a CV. I look at CVs these days and think, Jesus Christ, what was I doing when I was a student? I was just sort of sitting there going down to the pub and then doing a bit of work. And these guys are off saving the Nepalese women and, educating people in Africa, doing stuff in, death row. And I'm sitting there thinking, Jesus, I've wasted my life in comparison to what these applicants are. And the quality of applicants is way better than in my day. So that's the fifth one, apply for everything. Sixth one is really just practice for your interviews, because you really do need to have something interesting to say, and you just need that advocacy experience of doing it. And the seventh one is what Ryan started off with by saying, just be yourself. Be open, be honest, be fun, because that you need to like them just as much as they need to like you. So treat it as you are interviewing them also, because you want to like the people, you want to like the job. And one of the best answers I ever got in an interview from somebody was, what is your answer to this area of law? And they looked at me and said, I haven't got a clue. But what I would do is I'd go to the library, I'd find every book on it, I'd speak to people about it, and I'd get back to the answer. So I can't answer you now, but I'd answer you tomorrow. And I thought, that's a genius answer. Open, honest, friendly, funny, and we eventually took her on with pupillage. So those are my magnificent 7 of things. But really, working within government, I think, is the a most important thing for just mass learning at a very young age.
I love that, Patrick, particularly because in my interview for the Government Legal Service, I was asked a question to which I didn't know the answer, and that was my answer. And they said that is the right answer, because we don't want somebody who's going to bluff the answer.
Exactly.
And say to the Secretary of State for the Home Office, yes, you can do it, when he can't. So I think having the confidence, the point people have made earlier, have the confidence in yourself. And sometimes having the confidence to say no is just as important as having the confidence to say yes. I'm going to ask Ian. Ian, what would your top tips be?
Well, I would agree with Patrick in get whatever legal experience you can do. We are in a recessionary times, but that's not unique. When I first graduated and qualified, we had a big recession in the late 80s, early 90s. I couldn't get a pupillage for 2 years, but I applied for an advert for a legal assistant on a very low salary with the legal department of a local health authority. I ended up working there for 2 years, and by the end of it, I was promoted to the same grade as assistant solicitor. And by the end of it, I was conducting High Court litigation and even going to the Royal Courts of Justice on a judicial review. And I was appearing in the Coroner's Court representing doctors in medical accident cases. So that was fantastic experience. And then when I did apply for pupillage again, of course, I'd got the relevant litigation experience. But because I'd worked in an in-house legal department, when I then applied for my second pupillage, which was in industry, they were impressed with both my litigation experience, but the fact that I'd worked as an in-house lawyer for 2 years. So grab what experience you can. I do think local government, health authorities, government is an excellent place to get that experience, but don't go for the salary. Don't expect that you're going to be earning 100,000 in the first couple of years. The more important thing is to get the experience.
Thanks, Ian. I am conscious we're just a time, but I would just like to take a couple of moments more just to ask Sonia and Ryan what their top tips will be. And I promise we shall finish very shortly, but I'm enjoying this and I hope you all are too. So Sonia, what's your top tip?
So I would agree with Ian and Patrick, and everything that everyone has said. I also, Patrick, got a job with that answer. I'd gone into work somewhere just on a 2-week project and was asked a question about an area of law I couldn't possibly have known, gave that answer and got the job. But I think it's very difficult for young people. They're coming with a lot more debt than we ever came to expect. And I think that's very hard. Trying to get paid employment, I think, is important, but make use of it. I think, you know, the expectation has got to be, it's going to take you several years. For many, many people, it's going to take them a few years to get pupillage. And I think you need to look at where the pressures are at the moment in recruiting. So local authorities, they can grant you rights to appear in court without a practicing certificate. There are places, trusts, NHS trusts, they're not going to pay you well, but boy, have they got a lot of work. They have huge amounts of claims work, inquest work, GMC, NMC work, and you can go there. You're going to get very good experience. I think there is a real focus on chambers, but you've got to get a career going. And so any of that kind of experience is going to be good. So thinking how you can utilise this time while you're applying, be confident, never lie, never invent anything, never misspell anything in your CV, and don't waffle. Update. I still spend and have always spent half an hour updating myself on the law every single day. And the reason I do that, I was at an employment tribunal, made a submission, and I was told, Miss Hayes, I'm with you, but the Court of Appeal isn't with either of us, because the day before my submission would have been perfect, but there'd been a big judgment and I wasn't aware of it. You need to keep up to date. It doesn't matter what area of law you're at. That depth of knowledge will bring you confidence. So that's what I would say.
And that's the joy of working in a dynamic environment as well.
Yes.
That's some of the, it's a challenge, but it's fun too. Ryan, what's your top tip?
Well, I think you've heard most of the best tips already, but I would just underline the following points. Get the best results that you can. They won't guarantee you a place anywhere, but they can rule you out of consideration for some positions. Network, particularly with people slightly further on in their career than yourself. You'll find that they're more than happy to offer advice and to tell their war stories. You can learn a lot from not following other people's mistakes. If you're struggling to get a legal position, get pupillage, get in anywhere you can, in any role connected to the law. I think that's been shown by backgrounds of the speakers tonight. If you just stay connected to the law, and there are many, many routes into a legal career. Finally, while you're still young, you've got a lot of free time, and visit courts as often as you can.
Yes.
Actually, there is one thing I should have mentioned as well, which is some of the inns have got sort of mentor-mentee schemes, which are, I don't know how new they are, but I think they're very useful. I've got a mentee who's at the Financial Conduct Authority, and then also for my firm, I've got a mentee who's Senegalese trainee lawyer. And one, it's a great experience for me because I get to see somebody from the other side of the world who's facing completely different challenges to us. But I think it's a great thing for you, the potential mentee, to get somebody within completely different field or a linked field to give you real support. So check with your inn if they offer that, and then check elsewhere if you can get somebody as a mentor to kind of support you and give you assistance and introductions, networking, so on and so forth.
And for something more informal, BACFI is an ideal place to meet.
And there's application forms at the end of the session as well.
And discount for student membership.
Let Alex do the discount.
I believe it's only £20 for student members as well.
Just £20? That's a bargain.
You can talk to us more. I also wanted just to pick up on one final point that was asked in the chat about what are the opportunities for disabled students. And I think this is one thing the employed bar is really good at. I started off my career as an employment lawyer, and I know my employment law is out of date, but what I do know is that employers are obliged to make reasonable adjustments for disabled people, and that applies at the interview stage and all throughout your career. You'll find now, if you even apply for a job, if you're invited for an interview, you are asked whether or not you're prepared to state whether or not you're disabled. You're asked what reasonable adjustments are necessary for you, and people take it incredibly seriously. I'm aware of a blind lawyer who was actually, she joined her law firm, and this is one of the Magic Circle law firms. She joined as a trainee solicitor, as a blind trainee solicitor. And you can imagine the challenges she must face as a lawyer every day, the way we communicate, writing on whiteboards, reading your emails. You use your eyes so much, but she's still working at this law firm because they made the right reasonable adjustments that allowed her career to flourish. That's what you can see at the employed bar.
Yeah, and I mentioned in the chat about the Government Legal Service, which is a guaranteed interview scheme, which means if you have a disability and you're willing to announce it, etc., they will guarantee that you have an interview, which I thought was a great wheeze, as I'm diabetic, which I barely consider a disability, but it's classified as one. So I used it as a way to get multiple interviews, not because I wanted the jobs, but largely I wanted interview experience. So it was a great way of getting multiple interviews across government, great way of networking, and a great way of getting that sort of interview practice. So there's a lot of support, not just within the GLS, but within CPS as well as other private employers.
Now, one of the things my firm's trying to do is make sure you stick to time on your virtual meetings, and I've failed there. But I've really enjoyed talking to my colleagues, and I hope what's come across is our passion for the bar and our passion for the employed bar in particular. I hope we've demonstrated to you what a variety there is at the employed bar and how many different routes there are and how many different careers are open to you. I very much hope you've enjoyed this and found it useful. We do have a list of the employed bar pupillage providers, which we will circulate. And we'll also circulate details of bridging the bar, to which Barry referred. Now, before I say goodbye, I'm going to ask our illustrious leader, Ian, and Sandra, who keeps us in check at all times, whether there's anything else we should be saying.
Well, just first of all, Alex, I really want to thank you for chairing tonight's meeting. You've done an excellent job, and I'd like to thank all the speakers and Barry who's left, but just I think hopefully we've all given you some good tips and information. I'd like to thank Sandra, our administrator, who's done another excellent job in organising the event. We've got events coming up with BACFI. One event that students might enjoy is the Denning Lecture, and we've got Mike Sozzi, who is a General Counsel at BP Oil, and he's going to be talking about how COVID-19 has impacted diversity in the employed bar. So I think that should be a really interesting event. So that's, I think it's in December. So do check our website, bacfi.org. That's got all the information, or contact Sandra, who's our BACFI administrator. So thanks again, Alex.
Pleasure, and thanks to everybody who's joined us. And we wish you all the luck.
Yeah, good luck, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.